I think one of the earliest memories would be the first working bee I did there, and they just built the rectory, and there'd been an old house on the highway, and the rectory was built behind that house, and the old house had been pulled down, and we had a working bee to clear up the mess left after they pulled the house down.
So my first time at Victory Anglican was at church in the park, at Sheargold Park. So I'd been invited from a friend from uni, Sue Gardner, as she was. She's now Sue Pratt. And so Sue invited me along, and so I went to church in the park.
So the first time I came was in 1988, but I started regularly attending 1989 when I came down here to work.
Some of my earliest memories are actually when I was in Little Saints, and we used to have a demountable outside of St Peter's Hall, and there was a wooden life-size car made out of logs, and I remember as a kid loving that. And my second memory I could think of was playing hide and go seek in the old building. We used to have a red carpeted stage, and I used to fit through the manhole in the stage and could hide under there after Saturday at 6, so that's quite a throwback.
Well, there was a lot of thought going on about the fact that the existing church wasn't going to be big enough, because everyone knew that there was going to be a lot of development in Fig Tree. Well, the initial effort was put into trying to find some way of making the established church and facilities big enough to handle an increased congregation. Jimmy Hall got onto the fact that there was land available that we now own, and that stage was owned by a fellow called Lindsay Mains. And Lindsay was a farmer and developer, well-off fellow, and Jimmy badgered him a bit, and he decided to sell us a parcel of land. So we had some land. Well, there were other problems. I mean, they didn't have any money, and Jimmy Hall, unfortunately for Jim, he didn't see it built, because he finished up towards the end of 79, and Richard Andrew took over. And he came in 1980, and he got things going. There were sufficient people took out mortgages that enabled the church to get the loans, or the loan that they needed to build.
One of the things I think that motivated both Lisa and I independently to come to Victory was Bible teaching. Yeah. So we were both, I think, at the time going to churches that weren't teaching the Bible well, and so we were very keen to be part of a church where they actually taught the Bible, and so that has continued throughout the 30 years, I think.
And to see people, obviously led by God, to be able to use their gifts and skills to serve and help others and to honour God. And that's been an amazing thing. Over the years, we've seen a lot, but to see that still at work, yeah.
I think the most significant thing I've seen is just ministries and like ideas that people have space and resource to like flourish. So personally, seeing my mum have the vision for Manor, and then seeing how that has over like 10 plus years been able to change and grow as the church has and our resources have. Similarly with Ignite, seeing Ron come on staff and have the passion for youth and kind of kickstart what we now have as like a 7-day epic camp. I got to be a camp kid on the first Ignite years ago, and it was like a small little weekend thing, and just seeing how God has used our talent and time and treasure to like grow that has just been really cool.
We had very good days in the days of Barry Bryant as far as the older people are concerned, because we had a monthly luncheon, and we were all good friends at that, and it was another important part of our life.
We saw things like Summerfest, that was run over summertime. We saw extra services coming on because there were so many families and so many people attending church they couldn't fit everybody in. So before they built the new building. So lots of changes, lots of young people, so the youth group was growing, the Sunday school was growing, Yeah, and we were involved with parenting and marriage courses, and yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, the obvious thing is the numerical growth. So we joined, I think, at a great time in the sense that things were booming in terms of people coming to church. We can remember going to church in the hub and both halls being absolutely chock-a-block full of people, and which of course led to the building of the new auditorium.
Rod Irvine was a great one for extracting money from the parishioners, but he was successful and he got the additions built.
So we've seen God be unbelievably faithful over the period that we've been there. So, I mean, the build of the auditorium being one of those times when the people of Fig Tree prayed and really sought God's leading on whether we should embark and take a risk and build this auditorium or not.
I remember too, people of prayer. People were really committed to praying and wanting to know, was this where God wanted us to go? And, you know, and being flexible. So we worshipped at Tiggs for quite some time while the building was being built. And so I think in change too, we've seen people adjust and change as God had led them, and to be able to use their gifts in different ways to serve God. Yeah.
I think seeing people be able to learn about what their giftings are and be able to serve would be two things where I see God move. Ignite takes a lot of prep and planning and leadership, and there's so many roles from like behind the scenes to like up the front, creativity to like physical things to like logistics and planning. Seeing how God calls all of those elements together and like none of it would work if we all didn't come together, and it's like quite a exhausting but beautiful experience. And so I just think seeing the body of Christ really come together in that way, I've seen God work hugely in that respect.
Yeah, we've seen our kids make commitments to Christ at church, which has just been wonderful.
And as I think back of the people who've been before us, a very humble, prayerful people who stayed committed to seeking God and knowing what His will was for this church. And I'm encouraged by that to see these people just continue to keep their eyes fixed on God, and through good times and bad times. So it's not all plain sailing, and it's not all easy, and sometimes we don't always get it right, but to come back to God and to continue to seek Him for guidance and wisdom. So that may we be a people who continue to be humbly and prayerfully before God in where we go into the future. Yeah.
One of the big things I think that as a community that we have learnt and experienced is that God is faithful consistently throughout that 50 years. Even though church itself and how we do church has changed radically in that time, God has remained constant and remained faithful to His community and with a heart for the lost here in Fig Tree and beyond. Church will not look the same in 50 years, it will not look the same in 10 years. And one of the things I think that's characterised Fig Tree right from our first time is that the willingness to take risks.
I think it should motivate and excite us to take a risk to move forward, because potentially 50 years ago they wouldn't have looked at what we have now and even been able to imagine it, but because of their prayerfulness and trusting in God with what they had, we can now do what we do here. So I don't think we'll be able to vision what is going to be like in 50 years, but if we use that perspective of where we've come from, trust that God will push it forward, and just let it excite us to trust what He's going to do.
But you can say you've seen God at work at Fig Tree over the years.
I think so, yes. Oh, well, we wouldn't have got where we are.